Crawford. This is my reaction to the body ritual among the Nosferema by Horace Minor. I think our initial reaction that we were very surprised that because there was all these outlandish and hyperbolic activities and rituals and communication practices by the Nosferema, but it really is our own American culture. I think it was very surprising. And for evidence, I think when they had those focal nodes of medicine and they had these medicine men that could only use it and they were very high value because we idolized them and we visited these like focal nodes of medicine every day. I think that depicts how American society is in reality because we have certain people that use this practice to get a higher education and then they practice a field in medicine, like we have doctors and nurses and they're very high valuable and we compensate them with pay. I think the reason I was quick to judge is because the TED Talk Cross Cultural Communication by Pellegrino Riccardi talked about how we judge when there's not familiarity because they talked about like magical potions and like modern medicine wasn't like a thing for the Nasarema in terms of my perspective that I couldn't build familiarity with their culture, so I was really quick to judge. Another example is when they said they avoid the natural body and its natural functions. Um, I think that was I was quick to judge because I'm like, that's really weird. Like it's just the natural body. That's just how it works. But in American culture, we wear clothes, we have makeup, we have proper plumbing to hide our kind of natural body and functions because quote unquote we find our body ugly. We cover it up, not just because we want to be warm and comfortability, but because over society and evolution, that's how American culture has been developed into is like it's probably a good thing, but we wear clothing now. We have certain practices that we view as normal, but maybe other cultures won't. I think this is in regards to the article in Praise of Being Late by P.N. Hong. I think that's because there was clock time and event time, and based on what your perspective is and how you value time, whether you value time in chunks and organization or by completion and satisfaction, it depends on what your perspective is on something. So I think overall we were looking through this series of rituals and communication practices, but because I didn't build familiarity and because I had a different perspective, I was quick to judge. But a lot of the things like the medicine depicts how our modern medicine works in the world, and we idolize these medicine men that are doctors and how we think our body is ugly because we buy these clothes and we have hats and we have certain styles in American culture to cover our bodies because our naturalistic bodies aren't as beautiful as the clothes we buy. So I think it's easy to judge, but in simple text, it was just our culture. 2 minutes now to describe a communication ritual in America. Also, this often does these teenage male and females have now developed into their somewhat developing careers, and they have to experience rigorous amounts of studying in classes and education that might not be intrinsically valuable to their career and how they would advance their life. But they are doing these in order to get into another way of education that society has accepted as a social hierarchy. And when we get into these paid societies that we have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for, and once we do the same exact classes and mainly learn a lot of the same things for a very, very big ticket price, once we have graduated from this higher education, we are more like socially acceptable and based off the hierarchy of what we know and what we learn and the networking that we have produced in these paid societies, we have now moved forward to advance our career. We have to do many extracurriculars, have to get minimum test like numbers that represent how valuable we are and how what our intelligence is. And what I'm talking about is American colleges. We have to do in high school certain sports, certain extracurricular, certain leading activities, and get certain GPAs, and that's really just a number representing how valuable we are. Based off Francis Hughes' nine postulated values, I think we have our own self-interest, which is very important, and we want to be self-expressive in what we do and we want to advance our careers. But another thing is it's also the fourth rule of like the Hughes nine postulated values is like we want to be accepted by our peers because that is what how we derive our success. And we have our parents, we have our teachers, we have our other students, and just friends in general that we want to be accepted by. And colleges are societally accepted, even though we're paying this high ticket price for something that may not be intrinsically valuable to our actual knowledge. It's just accepted by society. I think this also kind of plays in the seventh rule of the nine postulate values, just because all humans are equal in colleges, but we have this starts like we have like variable differences. Like we have different education levels to begin with. We have different money. We have different areas where we live. But I think all humans are equal in the terms that we all have the ability to learn and go to college, but it's going to be changing over time. College in the 1700s, it's changed a lot, but even in the past century, it's kind of drastically changed In the early 19th century, we had colleges that were for higher education or a specialization of a skill or specialization of a topic. But now in today's colleges, I think it's a very generalization and they want us to be well-rounded and it's not as niche anymore. And I'll talk about the changes after this. But colleges, since its original induction of how it's processed and been worked, I think it's been socially more acceptable to go to college because we have this idea that higher education will necessarily mean more monetary value or more intrinsic value in our society and our U.S. American society because we have that self-interest in mind of the Hughes postulate of nine values, and we have that acceptance among peers, and it grew in popularity because college has now been this new gateway to success. And since its induction, it was just for specialization of skills, but nowadays I feel like it's for generalization of well-roundedness. And I think that will be a detrimental effect, which we'll get here shortly. Changes have been moved more from niche to generalization. I think colleges have a bigger cash grab, and overall, the changes are detrimental. According to the article, college is more expensive than it's ever been, and the five reasons to suggest why it's only going to get worse by Hillary Hoffauer, published by The Insider. They state that since the 1980s, the cost of tuition has actually doubled, and I feel like the intrinsic value of the courses and the classes that we take from higher education has not intrinsically doubled. I think it's more generalized, and they're making a lot of money on making people take core classes that they kind of already took in high school. I think it's detrimental because we think it has a self-interest and we're being accepted by peers, but I think we have grabbed onto materialism rather than having our own self-interest of actually having pursuing in a better career. We have this acceptance in society based off perceived values of American culture. We aren't actually being regulated by our own self-interest and what's actually best for us, the absolute truth, what's going to help us in our careers. Another thing is the eighth positive value explains that like how government should be taking action to tackle new problems more efficiently, but how government has led to subsidizations of loans and they are more available to people. More people think it's more socially acceptable because anyone can go to college now, and people are taking out loans, they have debt, and what's intrinsically value to the students of high schools and high school graduates is not college. I think it's really detrimental because we think we're going closer to our U.S. values by wanting to be accepted by peers. We're all equal and we all are treated equal. We all have the same opportunity. But college is this thing that costs so much for so little experience and value that I just think it's detrimental because we're actually straying further and further away from our U.S. values.